The world had collapsed faster than anyone could have imagined. What began as isolated reports of violent outbreaks in major cities spiraled into full-blown chaos in a matter of weeks. Governments crumbled, communication lines fell silent, and the living found themselves trapped between two horrors, the undead and those desperate enough to kill for survival. Mason Carter gripped the steering wheel of the rust-covered pickup, his knuckles white as he scanned the road ahead. The highway was littered with abandoned cars, some smashed into each other, their drivers either long dead or turned into the very things that had brought civilization to its knees. In the passenger seat, Olivia Monroe checked her rifle, ensuring it was loaded before glancing at Mason. "We can't keep driving forever," she said, her voice edged with exhaustion. Mason sighed, running a hand through his dirt-smeared hair. "I know, but stopping means risking another trap. You saw what happened back in Greenvale." Olivia shuddered at the memory. The so-called safe zone had been anything but. The moment they arrived, they were met with gun barrels instead of open arms. The group controlling the town had stripped travelers of their supplies, and those who resisted were left for the dead, literally. Mason and Olivia barely escaped with their lives. In the back seat, 13-year-old Danny stirred. His face was gaunt from days without proper food, his once bright eyes dulled by everything he had seen. "Are we close?" Danny asked, his voice small. Mason hesitated. "Yeah, kid. Just a little longer." They had no real destination, only the hope that somewhere out there, a true sanctuary existed, one that hadn't been overrun or corrupted by desperate survivors. The truck rolled forward, maneuvering through the wreckage until they reached a gas station on the outskirts of a small town. The building was intact, its windows dark, but whether that meant it was abandoned or occupied was another question. Mason pulled up near the entrance, cutting the engine. The silence that followed was unnerving. "I'll check it out," Olivia whispered, grabbing her knife. Mason nodded, keeping his rifle ready as she stepped out, moving with practiced stealth. The world had changed Olivia into something unrecognizable from the art teacher she once was. Danny watched her go, his hands fidgeting. "What if there are people in there?" "Then we hope they're not the kind who shoot first," Mason muttered. Minutes dragged by as Olivia disappeared inside. The tension was suffocating. Mason kept his eyes locked on the entrance, finger hovering over the trigger. Then Olivia reappeared, waving them forward. "It's clear," she said as Mason and Danny climbed out. "But I found something you'll want to see." Inside, the gas station smelled of mildew and dust, but it was intact. Shelves were mostly stripped, but a few scattered cans of food and water bottles remained. Olivia led them behind the counter, where a radio sat on a wooden crate. The battery-powered device was still functional, its static-filled transmission cutting through the eerie silence. Mason twisted the dial, searching for a signal. Then, a voice. "Repeat, if anyone can hear this, Safe Haven exists. We are alive. We have shelter. Head east along Highway 19. Look for the church with the blue steeple. Do not trust outsiders. Do not." The transmission cut off. Mason and Olivia exchanged glances. "Safe Haven," Olivia whispered. "It could be another trap," Mason warned. "Or it could be our only chance," she countered. Danny's eyes lit up with hope, something Mason hadn't seen in weeks. Mason sighed. The road ahead would be dangerous, but they had nothing left to lose. "All right," he said. "We head east." Little did they know, they weren't the only ones who had heard the broadcast. And in this world, the living could be far more dangerous than the dead. The road stretched before them, a winding path through desolation. Mason kept a firm grip on the wheel as the truck rumbled down Highway 19. The gas station radio broadcast still echoed in his mind, "Safe Haven exists. Look for the church with the blue steeple." It sounded too good to be true, but they had to try. Olivia sat in the passenger seat, gripping her rifle, scanning the tree line on both sides of the road. Danny lay in the back, his small frame curled up in a blanket they had scavenged weeks ago. "How much gas do we have left?" Olivia asked. Mason glanced at the gauge. "Enough to get close, but not all the way." "We'll need more." Olivia nodded. "Then we should stop soon. The further we go, the more likely we run into." A loud crack split the air. The windshield shattered. Mason barely had time to register the gunshot before he yanked the wheel, sending the truck skidding. The tires screeched against the cracked pavement as bullets peppered the side of the vehicle. "Out! Get out!" Mason shouted. Olivia threw the door open and grabbed Danny, yanking him to the ground as another bullet ricocheted off the metal frame. Mason grabbed his rifle, diving behind the truck for cover. They had walked into an ambush. From the trees, shadows moved, figures darting between the branches, rifles aimed at them. Mason's heart pounded. Survivors. But not the good kind. "Drop your weapons," a voice called. "And we might let you live." Mason's grip tightened on his rifle. Olivia crouched beside him, eyes flashing. "Bandits?" "Looks like it." Danny trembled between them, gripping Olivia's jacket. "What do we do?" Mason exhaled, scanning the tree line. 4, maybe 5, attackers, all with rifles. He could see their movements, but they had high ground. A direct fight would be suicide. "We can't win this," Olivia whispered. "Not like this." Mason glanced at the truck. Their supplies were inside, but they had no time to grab them. "Run," Mason said. Olivia's eyes widened. "Are you serious? They want our supplies. Not us. If we stay, we die." Another bullet whizzed past. "All right," Olivia growled. "We move fast. No stopping." Mason turned to Danny. "Stay between us. Do exactly as I say." Danny nodded, fear in his eyes. Mason took a breath. "Go." He sprang from cover, firing blindly into the trees as Olivia and Danny sprinted. A gunshot exploded behind them, too close. Branches whipped against their faces as they plunged into the dense forest. Mason's lungs burned, his boots slamming against the earth. Behind them, shouts rang out. They were being followed. Mason turned, raising his rifle, just as a figure burst from the trees. A man. Masked. Armed. Mason didn't hesitate. He pulled the trigger. The gun kicked against his shoulder as the attacker crumpled. "Keep going," Mason yelled. The gunfire faded behind them, replaced by the sound of something worse. A guttural moan. Danny tripped, landing hard on the ground. Olivia grabbed him just as a shadow lurched from the undergrowth. A walker. Its face was half-rotted, its jaw slack as it stumbled toward them. Mason raised his rifle, but another moan came from the left. Then the right. More were coming. "Climb!" Olivia shouted, pointing to a thick tree. Danny scrambled up, hands grasping branches, pulling himself higher. Mason and Olivia followed, panting as the dead closed in below. From their perch, they watched the walkers around the base of the tree, their decayed fingers reaching up. Stranded. Trapped. And behind them, the bandits were still hunting. The tree swayed slightly under their combined weight, branches creaking as Mason, Olivia, and Danny clung to its rough bark. Below them, a dozen walkers milled about, their grotesque faces turned upward, rotting fingers reaching. The smell of decay was overpowering, filling Mason's nose as he adjusted his grip. Danny clung to a branch, shaking. What do we do?" he stammered. Olivia glanced down, gripping her rifle. "We wait." They'll wander off. Mason wasn't so sure. The dead were unpredictable. Sometimes they lost interest. Other times, they stayed for days, waiting for their prey to fall into their grasp. A gunshot cracked in the distance, reminding Mason that their problems didn't end with the walkers. The bandits were still out there, hunting them. They'll find us if we stay here, Mason muttered. Olivia swore under her breath. Then we need a distraction. Mason scanned the forest. The highway was too far now, but a ridge sloped downward to the west. If they could get the dead moving that way. His eyes landed on Danny's small backpack. You still have that wind-up flashlight? Danny nodded, fumbling with the zipper. He pulled out the small, plastic device, the kind that didn't need batteries, just a crank. Mason took it. We throw it. The noise will pull them away. Olivia gave a tight nod. Then we move. Mason twisted the crank, filling the air with a sharp, whirring sound. The walkers groaned louder, drawn to the noise. He took careful aim and hurled the flashlight into the trees. It crashed against a rock, still spinning. The effect was immediate. The walkers turned, moaning as they shambled toward the noise. Their grasping fingers brushed the trunk of the tree one last time before they stumbled off into the underbrush. Mason didn't waste a second. Go! Danny climbed down first, Olivia right behind him. Mason followed, his boots hitting the dirt just as distant voices echoed through the forest. The bandits. Olivia's eyes met his. No words were needed. They ran. Branches snapped beneath their feet as they sprinted through the undergrowth. Mason's lungs burned, but he pushed forward, keeping Danny between them. A voice shouted behind them. Then, another gunshot. Bark exploded near Mason's head. They weren't just chasing them. They were trying to kill them. Faster! Olivia hissed, dragging Danny forward. Ahead, the trees thinned. Mason's heart leaped. An old hunting cabin sat nestled among the foliage, its wooden walls weathered but intact. Inside. Mason ordered. They hit the porch hard, Olivia slamming the door open. Danny scrambled in first, followed by Olivia. Mason rushed in last, shoving the door closed just as another bullet splintered the frame. His breath heaved. Footsteps pounded outside. We're trapped, Olivia whispered. Mason's eyes darted around the room. The cabin was small, one room, a dusty cot, and a single window covered by a moth-eaten curtain. No back exit. Danny clutched his knees, his breath ragged. They're gonna find us. Mason set his rifle against the doorframe, heart hammering. Outside, the bandits slowed. Shadows flickered past the window. One of them chuckled. No use hiding, a gruff voice called. We got you surrounded. Silence fell. Then, something unexpected. A scream. But not from inside the cabin. From outside. Mason's pulse spiked. He peeked through the curtain. The bandits were backing away, weapons raised. The forest behind them moved. A horde. Dozens, maybe hundreds, of the dead were emerging from the trees, drawn by the earlier gunfire. The hunters had become the hunted. Mason turned to Olivia. We wait. Let them deal with the mess they made. Outside, the screams continued. The bandits had made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated the dead. Screams tore through the forest as the dead descended on the bandits. Mason, Olivia, and Danny crouched inside the cabin, barely breathing as the chaos unfolded just outside. The thick wooden walls muffled most of the sound, but the grotesque chorus of moans and desperate gunfire still sent chills down Mason's spine. Danny covered his ears, his small frame shaking. They're dying, he whispered. Olivia's face was unreadable, her grip firm on her rifle. They would have killed us first. Mason peered through a crack in the window. The bandits were being overrun, their formation collapsing under the sheer weight of the horde. One of them, a man wearing a red jacket, tried to run, but the dead were faster. They tackled him to the ground, tearing into him before he could even scream. Another, a woman with a shotgun, fired wildly, her shots echoing through the trees. The bullets tore through a few walkers, but it wasn't enough. They kept coming. Mason exhaled. That's our cue. Olivia nodded. If we move now, we can slip out while the dead are distracted. Mason turned to Danny. You good to run? Danny swallowed hard but nodded. Mason glanced at the door. All right. We go out the back window, quietly. Olivia helped Danny as Mason pried the window open. The musty scent of rotting wood filled his nose, but beyond that, the crisp air of the forest promised an escape. He climbed out first, rifle at the ready. Olivia passed Danny through, then followed. They crouched low, moving in the opposite direction of the carnage. Every step was calculated, their breaths shallow. The moans of the dead still filled the air, but the bandit screams were growing fewer. Mason spotted a path leading away from the cabin. This way. They moved fast, feet crunching against leaves and twigs. The forest stretched out before them, the path winding through the underbrush. Then, a voice. Wait. Mason froze. Olivia spun, aiming her rifle. A man stumbled toward them from the carnage. He was injured, his face streaked with blood. One of the bandits. Please, he gasped. Don't leave me. Mason's grip on his rifle tightened. The man, barely more than a kid, maybe early 20s, held his hands up in surrender. I wasn't gonna hurt you. I swear. I didn't want to be part of this. Behind him, the sounds of the horde were fading. Either the bandits were dead, or they had scattered. Mason hesitated. Olivia's voice was cold. We don't have time for this. Danny, however, looked at the man with wide, conflicted eyes. He's scared, he whispered. Mason cursed under his breath. They couldn't trust him. But leaving him meant sending him to certain death. A rustling in the trees made the decision for them. More walkers were moving in their direction, stragglers from the horde. Mason turned to the young man. You come with us, you pull your weight. No second chances. The man nodded frantically. I will. I promise. Olivia gritted her teeth but didn't argue. Then let's move. They ran. The forest opened up ahead, revealing an old service road. Mason scanned the area, no movement, no signs of recent travel. It was as safe as they were going to get. They paused to catch their breath. Mason turned to the newcomer. What's your name? Jace, the young man panted. Jace Holloway. Mason studied him. You were with them. Why? Jace hesitated. They found me a few weeks ago. I didn't have a choice. They said if I didn't follow orders, they'd kill me. He looked down, shame flickering across his face. I didn't want to hurt anyone. Olivia scoffed. And yet, here we are. Danny tugged on Mason's sleeve. We should go. Mason agreed. Safe haven was still their goal. This was just another obstacle. We keep moving, Mason said. But if you try anything, Jace, he let the threat hang in the air. Jace nodded quickly. I won't. The group pressed forward, leaving the forest behind. Ahead, the road stretched into the unknown. And safe haven was waiting. The service road stretched before them, cracked and overgrown, nature reclaiming what humanity had abandoned. Mason led the way, rifle in hand, scanning the horizon. Olivia kept to his right, her grip firm on her own weapon. Behind them, Danny and Jace walked in silence, their footsteps crunching against loose gravel. Jace had barely spoken since joining them. He kept his head down, his hands tucked close to his chest as if trying to make himself smaller. Mason didn't trust him, but the kid had held up his end of the deal so far, no sudden moves, no attempts to run. That didn't mean Mason was letting his guard down. Safe haven was still miles away, but the closer they got, the heavier the weight in Mason's chest became. Would it really be safe? Or was it just another Greenvale, a death trap in disguise? A gust of wind swept down the road, rustling the trees. The scent of decay clung to the air, a constant reminder that the dead were never far. How much farther? Danny asked, his voice small. Mason adjusted his grip on the rifle. If that radio message was legit, we should be close. Maybe a few hours out. If we don't run into trouble, Olivia muttered. Trouble was inevitable. They walked for another hour, the road winding through hills and clusters of abandoned homes. Most were stripped bare, windows shattered, doors hanging open like gaping mouths. Mason hated stopping, but they needed supplies. We check the houses, Mason said, gesturing to a row of small, weather-worn homes. Quick and quiet. Olivia nodded. Jace, you're with me. Mason, take Danny. Jace flinched at the assignment but didn't argue. Mason led Danny toward the first house. The door was unlocked. With a slow push, it creaked open, revealing a darkened interior. Dust particles floated in the air, caught in the light of the setting sun. Mason stepped inside, sweeping his rifle across the room. A couch sat overturned in the middle of the floor, a dried bloodstain smeared across the wall. Danny hesitated in the doorway. Is it safe? Mason nodded. Stay close. The kitchen was ransacked, cabinets hanging open, but a quick search revealed a single can of peaches and a half-full bottle of water. Jackpot, Mason muttered. Danny cracked a small smile. It was the closest thing to good news they'd had in a while. As Mason tucked the supplies into his pack, something creaked upstairs. He froze. Danny grabbed his sleeve. What was that? Mason didn't answer. Instead, he raised his rifle and moved toward the staircase. The steps groaned under his weight as he ascended, Danny staying just behind him. The hallway was dark. Mason's pulse quickened as he reached the first door. It was slightly ajar. He nudged it open with the barrel of his gun. A walker lay on the floor, tangled in the torn remains of a bedsheet. Its legs were twisted unnaturally, like it had fallen from the window and tried to crawl back inside. Sunken, milky eyes locked onto Mason. It let out a guttural hiss and stretched its arms toward him. Mason didn't hesitate. He raised his rifle and fired. The gunshot was deafening in the small space. The walker's head snapped back, then slumped lifelessly to the floor. Danny winced. That was loud. Mason swore under his breath. He had been so focused on the threat that he hadn't thought about the noise. They needed to leave. Fast. Mason grabbed Danny's arm and rushed down the stairs, out the front door. Olivia and Jace were already outside, eyes wide. That was you? Olivia asked. Yeah. But we need to. A low, collective moan interrupted him. From the tree line, figures began to emerge. 5. 10. 15. More. The gunshot had drawn them. Jace cursed. Oh, we're so dead. Run. Mason barked. They sprinted down the road, the horde in pursuit. The dead weren't fast, but they never stopped. Never tired. Danny struggled to keep up, his breath ragged. Olivia grabbed his hand, pulling him along. Mason's heart pounded as he scanned the horizon. They needed an escape. Fast. Then, he saw it. A rusted SUV sat abandoned near a collapsed gas station. It was a long shot, but... over there. Mason pointed. They reached the vehicle, Mason yanking the door open. The keys were still in the ignition. A miracle. He turned them. The engine sputtered. No, 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 he growled. Come on. The horde was closing in. Jace pounded on the roof. They're almost here. Mason twisted the key again. The engine roared to life. Get in. They piled inside, slamming the doors. Mason floored the gas pedal. The tires screeched, and the SUV lurched forward, plowing through the decayed bodies in its path. The dead vanished in the rearview mirror. For now. Danny exhaled shakily. We made it. Mason wasn't convinced. Olivia looked ahead. Now let's see if Safe Haven is real. The road stretched on. And the truth waited ahead. The SUV rumbled down the cracked highway, the roar of its engine the only sound breaking the uneasy silence. Mason kept his hands tight on the wheel, his knuckles white as his eyes scanned the road ahead. The sun was dipping lower, casting long shadows across the desolate landscape. Beside him, Olivia kept her rifle close, her gaze flicking between the side mirror and the horizon. Danny sat in the back, still catching his breath from the chase, while Jay stared out the window, silent since they'd escaped the horde. Mason's mind churned. Safe Haven. Was it real? Or just another false promise, like so many before? A worn, rusted road sign came into view. The words were barely legible beneath the dirt and bullet holes, but one detail stood out. Safe Haven, 10 miles. Mason's chest tightened. It was real. Or at least, it had been. Olivia exhaled. Well, there's your answer. Danny sat up straighter. We're almost there. Looks like it, Mason muttered. But something didn't sit right. It was too quiet. The road had been abandoned for miles. No other survivors, no signs of movement. Just empty land and the ghosts of what once was. Then, something ahead. Mason squinted. Structures. A small outpost of some kind. Guard towers. Check it out, Olivia said, pointing. That's military. Mason slowed the SUV, approaching cautiously. The outpost was built around the remains of an old gas station, reinforced with metal barricades and barbed wire. A survivor camp. Or at least, it had been. The gates hung open. The guard towers were empty. Jace leaned forward. I don't like this. Mason pulled the SUV to a stop just outside the perimeter. Neither do I. He killed the engine. The silence that followed was deafening. For a long moment, none of them moved. Then Olivia spoke. We check it. Fast and careful. Mason nodded. Danny stays in the car. Danny didn't argue. He just swallowed hard and nodded. Mason and Olivia stepped out, rifles raised. Jace followed hesitantly, gripping a crowbar he'd scavenged. The air was still, thick with the stench of old death. They moved through the entrance, stepping over discarded bullet casings and broken supplies. It had been a battle. Mason's gut twisted. Stay sharp. They moved through the outpost, past overturned crates and makeshift living quarters. There were no bodies, just bloodstains smeared across the ground. Something had happened here. Something bad. Jace swallowed. Where is everyone? Olivia turned a slow circle, taking in the emptiness. Gone. Mason's jaw tightened. He scanned the main building, its door barely hanging on its hinges. If there were answers, they'd be inside. He stepped forward. A sound. A faint shuffle. Mason froze. Jace's grip on his crowbar tightened. "Did you hear that?" Another shuffle. Closer. Olivia raised her rifle. "We're not alone." A low, guttural moan echoed from the darkened entrance of the building. Then another. And another. Mason's stomach dropped. Then, they emerged. Walkers. A dozen at least, their bodies gaunt and torn, eyes vacant and hungry. They had been inside all along, waiting, trapped until now. "Back to the car." Mason barked. They turned, sprinting. The dead followed, their moans growing louder. Jace stumbled, nearly losing his balance, but Olivia yanked him forward. Mason reached the SUV first, wrenching the door open. "Danny, get down." Danny ducked into the footwell just as Olivia and Jace scrambled inside. Mason jumped into the driver's seat and turned the key. Nothing. His breath hitched. He twisted the key again. The engine sputtered. A walker slammed against the window, its decayed face pressing against the glass. Come on, Mason growled. The moans grew louder. The horde was surrounding them. Then, the engine roared to life. Mason didn't hesitate. He slammed his foot on the gas. The SUV lurched forward, plowing through the dead. Bodies crunched beneath the tires as they barreled through the open gate and back onto the road. Danny peeked over the dashboard. Did we get out?" Mason exhaled, gripping the wheel. "Yeah, kid. We did." Jace sat back, shaking his head. That place, it was a trap. Olivia's eyes were hard. Not a trap. A graveyard. Mason glanced at the rearview mirror. The outpost disappeared into the distance, swallowed by the setting sun. Safe haven was still ahead. But trust was running thin. The SUV roared down the empty highway, the dust cloud behind them the only sign of life. Mason's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched tight. The outpost had been a dead end, just another broken promise in a world where hope was running on fumes. Olivia sat beside him, silent, rifle resting across her lap. In the back seat, Danny fidgeted with the straps of his backpack while Jace stared blankly out the window, the tension between them thick as smoke. They were running out of time. Safe haven was still ahead, but after what they'd just escaped, Mason wasn't sure what they'd find when they got there. A sign loomed in the distance, barely visible in the dimming light. The letters were chipped and weathered, but the words sent a ripple through the car. Safe haven, 3 miles. Jace exhaled. We're close. Danny perked up. Do you think? A gunshot rang out. The windshield shattered. Mason jerked the wheel as a bullet tore through the passenger side glass, missing Olivia by inches. Get down, he shouted. More gunfire erupted from the trees lining the road. Ambush! Olivia yelled, ducking. Mason floored the gas pedal. The SUV swerved as bullets pelted the frame, sparks flying off the metal. He caught a glimpse of figures hidden among the trees, armed survivors. Jace cursed. They're trying to take us out. Danny screamed as another bullet struck the side mirror, shattering it. Mason kept driving, refusing to stop. Whoever they were, they weren't friendly. Then, a barricade. Just ahead, an overturned truck blocked the road, a makeshift wall of debris stacked behind it. No, Mason muttered. There was no way around it. Hold on, he barked, wrenching the wheel. The SUV fishtailed, tires screaming against the pavement. He aimed for the narrowest gap between the truck and the trees, barely wide enough for them to squeeze through. Crash! The side of the SUV scraped against the truck's twisted metal, tearing into the paint. Then, they were through. Mason didn't stop. Not until the gunfire faded behind them. Only then did he finally exhale, chest heaving. Danny was crying quietly in the back, clutching his seatbelt. Jace was shaking. Olivia turned to Mason, her eyes like steel. "That wasn't random," she said. "They were waiting for us." Mason's jaw tightened. "They didn't just want to scare us off. They wanted to kill us." Jace ran a hand through his hair, his breathing ragged. "Who the hell were they?" Mason glanced in the rearview mirror. The road behind them was empty now, but he knew better. "People like us," he said. "Only worse." Danny wiped his eyes. What if Safe Haven isn't safe?" No one answered. They reached the outskirts of Safe Haven just as the sun dipped below the horizon. Mason slowed the SUV, scanning the perimeter. The settlement was real. A massive steel fence loomed ahead, stretching wide, reinforced with concrete barriers and watchtowers. Spotlights illuminated the area, casting long beams of light over the abandoned highway. People moved along the walls, guards, armed and alert. Mason's heart pounded. This was the most fortified place he'd seen since the world fell apart. But there was no movement at the gates. No one signaling for them to approach. Jace shifted uncomfortably. "Why aren't they waving us in?" Mason pulled the SUV to a stop a safe distance from the gate. Olivia rolled down her window, lifting her rifle but keeping the barrel pointed down. "We come in peace," she shouted. Silence. Then, a voice over a loudspeaker. "State your names." Mason's pulse quickened. He stepped out of the vehicle, keeping his hands where they could see them. "Mason Carter," he called. "This is Olivia, Jace, and Danny. We heard the radio broadcast. We need shelter." A long pause. Then the loudspeaker crackled again. "Turn around. Safe Haven is closed." Mason's stomach dropped. "What?" Olivia shouted. "You can't be serious. You sent out a signal." The guards didn't move. Jace stepped forward, desperation in his voice. "You can't just leave us out here." The loudspeaker crackled again. "Turn around. Last warning." Danny's voice broke. "Mason." Mason felt it, too. That sinking, dreadful realization. There was no safe haven. Not for them. Mason's heart pounded in his chest. The steel gates of Safe Haven loomed before them, locked tight, the guards above showing no signs of mercy. Their voices echoed coldly through the loudspeaker. "Turn around. Safe Haven is closed." Danny clutched Mason's sleeve, his small fingers trembling. "They're lying, right?" Mason didn't know what to say. Olivia stepped forward, furious. "We've been fighting to get here. You can't just send us back out there." Silence. Mason saw them, figures watching from behind the walls, survivors peering through cracks, their faces pale, hollow-eyed. They weren't just protecting Safe Haven. They were hiding something. Then the spotlights shut off. One by one, the floodlights surrounding the walls clicked off, plunging them into darkness. A deep, horrible dread settled in Mason's gut. "Something's wrong," he whispered. Then, the moaning began. A sound they all knew too well. Mason turned toward the highway, his blood running cold. Out of the darkness, walkers were coming. Dozens. Hundreds. A massive horde, spilling onto the road like a wave of death. Silent no more. The guards had known. They hadn't locked them out just to be cruel. They had locked them out because they were already surrounded. Danny whimpered, stepping back. "No, no, no, no." Jace grabbed his head. "We're trapped." Mason spun toward the gate. "Let us in. We'll fight with you." No response. The guards above stood still, their weapons tight in their hands. They were going to let them die. Mason clenched his fists. Like hell they would. He turned to the SUV. We drive through. Olivia hesitated, then nodded. We don't have a choice. Jace wasn't convinced. We don't even know if it'll break the gate. Then we die trying. Mason snapped. The moaning grew louder. They were close. Mason shoved Danny into the back seat. Olivia and Jace scrambled inside. He jumped behind the wheel, slammed his foot on the gas. The SUV roared forward. 50 feet. 40. 30. The gate stood tall, reinforced with metal beams. Would it break? Bam! Gunfire ripped through the windshield. Mason ducked as bullets slammed into the hood, the guards above finally reacting. They're shooting at us. Jace screamed. Hold on. Mason yelled. The SUV smashed into the gate. A sickening crunch of metal. The world lurched. Then, silence. Mason gasped, his body thrown against the steering wheel. The windshield was shattered, the frame of the SUV buckled. But the gate. It held. Danny whimpered. Olivia groaned, gripping her side. Mason looked up. The guards weren't shooting anymore. Instead, they were running. And that's when he heard it. The crash. The first wave of walkers hit the SUV. The car rocked violently as decayed hands slammed against the windows, bodies piling up, moans rising into a terrible crescendo. The horde was here. Move! Mason roared. He shoved the door open, firing. One walker dropped. Another lunged, Olivia shot it in the skull. Jace pulled Danny out, shielding him as they scrambled toward the side of the wall. Mason emptied his clip, but it wasn't enough. There were too many. The guards had abandoned the towers. Safe haven was falling. The dead weren't stopping at the SUV. They were climbing the walls. Jace screamed. We're gonna die out here. Mason refused to accept that. His eyes darted to a fire escape leading to a balcony on the wall. A way in. Up there, he yelled. They ran. Olivia reached it first, jumping onto the ladder and pulling herself up. Jace lifted Danny. Go! Go! Mason fired one last shot before grabbing the ladder. The dead swarmed below, arms reaching, teeth gnashing. Danny sobbed as Jace pulled him up. Mason was right behind, feet slipping, hands burning. Then. Boom! A massive explosion ripped through the wall. The ground shook. The blast sent a shockwave through the night, fire bursting through the steel barricade. The gates of Safe Haven collapsed. Mason barely managed to pull himself onto the ledge as walkers poured inside. Screams echoed from within the compound. Survivors ran. The people inside Safe Haven had never been safe. They had just been waiting to die. Mason grabbed Danny, pulling him into his arms as a second explosion shook the ground. Olivia looked at him, her eyes wide, breathless. This place is done. Mason nodded. We move. Now. The four of them ran, disappearing into the burning ruins of Safe Haven. And behind them, the world drowned in fire and death. The end.